Just to say, first of all, how wonderful it is for me to be back in Portugal, and especially back in Lisbon, which is a really significant city in my personal life. I think maybe some of you know, but maybe others don't. I will just say this very quickly, that Lisbon is a city of firsts for me. It's where I first became a properly trained EFL teacher, where I first became a teacher trainer, where I first met my husband, who is actually my first and only husband, and also where I had my first child, who is Alfacinha de Lisboa, okay, and I always love coming back here, and thanks very much indeed to APPI for inviting me for the second year running, which I feel is a huge treat and privilege, so thank you very much. And my session with you this morning is reflections on how to be a highly effective primary teacher. Okay, but what I would like to say, first of all, is that actually everything I'm talking about in this session applies to any kind of teachers. So if you're also teaching, you know, secondary, adults, business, or if you're a teacher educator, I think you will find things in this session for you, although obviously this morning I'm particularly focusing with my examples and discussion on primary. And I would just like to start this session with a little story. And this is a story of the plumber and the tap. And it's a story about a woman in her kitchen. Actually, this is a photo of my kitchen tap. And the kitchen tap is not working. And the woman is feeling really, really frustrated about it, and also, you know, wanting to do it herself. So down she gets into the cupboard, fiddling with all the connections in the pipes, knocking it, trying it again, doing everything she can, but she can't. And the tap will not work. And eventually she feels she must contact a plumber. So she rings the plumber, you know, and in the guy comes. He's got his blue overalls on and his plumber bag, and he is ready to fix the pipe. And he has a look at the pipe, he bends down into the cupboard, and out of his plumber's bag, he gets a little hammer. And down he gets again, and he taps lightly on the pipe. And then turns on the tap, and the water gushes out. And the woman is absolutely delighted. Her tap is working again. And then the plumber produces his bill, and it costs £50. And she is outraged. All you did was get down into that cupboard and tap a pipe, and you're charging me £50 for that? I want a more detailed invoice. So the plumber provided a more detailed invoice, and this is what he gave her. And you know something? This is what it's like for us as teachers. During our careers and our professional development, we increasingly learn to know where to tap in order to get the most effective and successful learning outcomes with our students. And I would just like us to think for a moment about how we learn to tap in our careers and in our classrooms. What are the kinds of things we do? For example, reading. For example, attending conferences like APPI. What else do we do? Would you like to just talk about that for a moment with the person next to you? Say hi if you don't know each other. Turn around if you need someone to talk to. Okay, I don't want to spend too long on this. Anyone like to call out some ideas? How do we know where to tap? Just shout out some things. There was a lot of discussion going on. Perhaps you weren't on task. What kind of things did you come up with? Sharing ideas with colleagues, absolutely, in the staff room. Any other things? Okay, reading, and particularly these days online, loads of blogs and things that we can read. Okay, well, here are some ideas. Reading, of course, which we talked about. Conferences, APPI is a prime example of that. Courses that we may go on, whether online, blended, face-to-face. Our own experience, okay, we learn from our classroom experience through social media these days, through the kind of personal learning networks, PLNs, that we create on social media sites such as Facebook and Twitter, through our colleagues, as was mentioned here, in the staff room, through internet, as Diana was indirectly referring to there, and perhaps through action research in our own classrooms. And of course also, and this is something that will be very familiar to you from your training, through reflective practice. Reflective practice, a kind of model which leads from analysis and action through to reflection and changing what we do. And the idea of reflective practice is that we continually improve our professional practice through successive cycles and very much learn from our own classroom experience. So it's very much, if you like, grounded theory. Now, as some of you will know, I'm sure, there are plenty of different models of reflective practice. Ramani, for example, Donald Freeman, task cycle. I particularly like this one by Andrew Pollard, partly because he was one of the first mainstream primary practitioners whose works that I read when I was starting out as a teacher. And of course, as we go through our careers, we become more and more competent, or at least that's certainly the idea. And I think it's very useful to think about how we become more competent in our professional area by looking at a model of conscious competence. This conscious competence model, which actually has been around since, believe it or not, the 1960s, in the last century. But I think it is a very good model for us to think about where we are in different domains of our teaching. So, for example, to start off with, where we're in a state of unconscious incompetence. In other words, we're not even aware of the skills we need in order to perform effectively. You know, that might very often be the case, for example, you know, if we've never taught kindergarten children before, we're not even aware of what we need to know and be able to do at that stage. The second stage, a state of conscious incompetence. Okay, so if you like, stage one is a state of blissful ignorance. Stage two, a state of conscious incompetence, whereas, yeah, I know there's a lot I need to know, help, I need this kind of stage. Okay, moving on to conscious competence, where actually we can do it, we can put it into practice, but we need to make a whole load of effort. We need to concentrate on what we're doing. Sometimes we can do it, sometimes we can't do it. It's this kind of area where we are, you know, continually practicing and aware of how we need to be able to do things better. And the last stage, of course, is the unconscious competence, where we almost do it like riding a bicycle. You know, we can make our lesson plans on the back of a metro ticket and go into class, and things will more or less kind of work for us. And of course, in this model, first of all, you know, this is not about our global professionalism, but can apply to different domains of our teaching. I can think, for example, stages of my own career where I've gone back to a different level of competence as I've been learning new things. For example, when I first became a teacher educator, for example, when I first started teaching 3-year-olds for the first time, and also more recently to do with the whole advent of using technology with skill and fluidity in the classroom. Okay, so those kind of 4 areas, but of course there's also been a stage 5 talked about and speculated about. What do you think the stage 5 would be, do you think? After you can do it riding on a bike, you know, you don't even have to think about it. Well, a couple of suggestions have been made. One has been enlightened competence. I'm not actually sure what that means exactly. But another suggestion has been made, which I fear is often closer to the truth, and that is complacence. Okay, that you can do it riding on a bike, so you actually don't take your learning further anymore. Well, I know that none of us in this room are complacent, because you wouldn't be here if you were. And I certainly don't feel I am. You know, after 30 years of teaching, I think one of the attractions of why we carry on in our profession is the continuous challenges that it provides. And so actually, what I would like to go on to present to you, if you like, is my own reflective teacher wheel. I found, in fact, it was a few months ago that I developed this idea for the talk, and I kind of felt with everything that I'm reading at the moment online, with the kind of monetization of education, that we're talking about education these days as an industry, where we read increasing criticism of teachers and how actually software and technology and big data are going to be able to accomplish things in a way that are more effective for more people than the human interface of the teacher. Now, of course, I feel passionately about the importance of the human contact. You know, I've seen the discourse changing, personalization, which, you know, in the days when I started out teaching meant the kind of human interaction between you and your pupils, or your pupils and each other. Personalization, the discourse is shifting. It's beginning to mean the interaction between you and a device. And so I think in the face of all these changes, which I'm not going to spend more time on now, but we have a duty and a responsibility, and especially as primary teachers responsible for the new generations coming up, to think about what it means for us to be a really effective teacher. And so here's my wheel now, and as we go through it, I would like you to think of ingredients that you would also like to add or take away, and reflect on it in the different areas of your teaching. Some of you will be teaching very little ones, some of you older, secondary perhaps, some are not even doing young learners at all perhaps, but have just wandered into this session thinking you might have a post-breakfast siesta or something. Okay, so we'll do that now. And my wheel begins like this, and I would just like you to, with the person next to you, just predict what you think the first ingredient of the wheel is. Any ideas? Motivation. Yeah, no, I thought you'd say that. Of course, you're absolutely brilliant, and motivation is a huge part of it. But I didn't want this to be too obvious, so actually it's not motivation. Okay, the first ingredient on my wheel is mindset. Okay, it's mindset, but it actually covers motivation, as we'll see it in just a moment. And mindset, and there are two aspects of this that are really important. The mindset of teachers and the mindset that we develop in our learners. And in relation to our role as teachers, developing mindsets that are open and appropriate and flexible for the classroom is to do with the development of our own metacognitive skills. We're often so busy thinking about the metacognitive skills of our learners that we forget about our own metacognitive skills. You, as a teacher, have choice about the way you think and the way you act in the classroom. And we can deliberately think ourselves into mindsets that are going to be most effective. John Hattie, in his book, Visible Learning for Teachers, which I have to recommend to you and say is one of the books that has most influenced me in recent times, he talks about, and he's done this kind of 80,000 meta-analysis of evidence of what people write about teachers, so it is evidence-based. And he talks about how teachers who actually believe that they can be agents of change, in his own words, okay, that can actually make a difference to the pupils in the classroom that they have, are the ones that are likely to be the most effective. That we have choice in the way that we think, and we can, as teachers, deliberately nurture positive mindsets. Now, of course, this relates very closely to motivation and the work particularly by Zoltán Dorniai in recent years, and this on the importance of actually having a vision of what you can be like as a teacher and how you can be most effective. And one of the people that Dorniai quotes, and I will put it up here, William Arthur Ward, if you can imagine it, you can achieve it. If you can dream it, you can become it, okay? Now, this also, any of you who are familiar with NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, will also recognize that this has roots in there, the kind of Walt Disney strategy technique. But the important thing about Dorniai's work and research on motivation is that it is evidence-based. And actually fostering these beliefs in ourselves is really, really important. And just a little activity that we will do now, which is based on the more practical book of the application of his research that Dorniai has done with Jill Hadfield, a teacher identity tree. Okay, and I would like you to think of all the qualities that you have and or would like to develop as a teacher. For example, you want to be creative, flexible, patient, understanding. Think of all those things. And what I would like you to do just now is a little identity tree, okay? So take a sheet of your APPI paper and draw a lovely tree, okay? And let's say we don't have too much time. So let's say at least 3 branches on your tree, okay? And then I would like you to think about the qualities that you would like to have as a teacher and write them on each branch, okay? You ready to do that? You've got about 15 seconds. Would you like to just show your trees to the person next to you and see the qualities that you've thought of? Beautiful trees. They're wonderful. Okay, fantastic. Well, I'm just going to give you a little bit of homework to do on the train when you go home tonight, or plane or car or whatever it is, to actually finish your trees, Okay? And when you go into class on Monday morning, remember those qualities. Believe in them. Believe in yourselves as having them. And you will find it makes a huge difference. Because, in fact, of course, our habits and behaviors in class, and this is not, I am not a psychologist and I'm not going to go into this any depth, but as an ordinary, layman in the world of psychology, I can relate to this totally, that actually the kind of mindsets and values and principles and beliefs that we have actually lead to habits and behaviors. And the kind of mindsets that it's very easy for us to slip into when we're teachers in quite difficult situations. We don't have enough space. We hate the course book we're using. The children are difficult. The parents aren't supportive. The institute, it's all very easy for us to blame everything outside ourselves. But actually we need to turn that, I know it's easier said than done, into a positive and be in charge of our mindsets, which will lead to better outcomes. As this kind of little traditional thing says, you could perhaps say it with me. It goes, watch your thoughts, for they become words. Watch your words, for they become actions. Watch your actions, for they become habits. Watch your habits, for they become character. Watch your character, for it becomes your destiny. Okay, and you're in charge of that. And it's one of the most important things. And if we get that kind of right, everything else falls into place, however good we are at our techniques and the knowledge that we have, and so on. Okay, so that's mindsets for us as teachers. It's also important for us to develop particular kinds of mindsets in our learners. And I'm thinking here of mindsets such as critical and creative thinking skills, which of course has become increasingly, this is not something new, but has become increasingly on the agenda since the beginning of this century. But I'm also thinking particularly of the development of a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. Now, there'll be some of you here that I'm sure will recognize that this comes from the work of Professor Carol Dweck at Stanford University. And Carol Dweck has done a lot of research. I'm not going to go into detail about it, but if you Google it, you'll find it in an instant. Basically about the feelings and emotions and responses underpinning motivation. So again, that kind of M word. And in the research that she's done, she has shown that in school contexts and when working with children, both as parents and as educators, it is really crucial to develop in the children we work with a growth mindset rather than a fixed mindset. Now, a fixed mindset has a kind of helpless orientation. And those of us who are involved in developing reading skills, for example, with children, there's a helpless orientation very often with children learning to read. They feel they can't do it and they just give up. They feel that what they can achieve is to do with their innate intelligence and talents. And that if they can't do something, it's because they're no good and they give up. And one of the crucial things is the way that that kind of fixed mindset can be inadvertently reinforced by carers and educators and parents who tell children, you're brilliant, very good, you're a wonderful singer, actor, dancer, whatever. The child develops this idea, and as soon as something becomes challenging and difficult, they think, no, I'm not wonderful, brilliant, talented, I can't do anything about it, and I give up. And Carol Dweck contrasts that with a growth mindset, which rather than helpless-oriented, is mastery-oriented. So it's where the carers and teachers and parents of children give feedback that focuses on the effort and persistence that children have made to achieve something. So that rather than feeling when something is difficult, I'm just going to give up, they actually feel, if I put more effort into this, if I try harder, I will achieve. And it's this kind of growth mindset that is very powerful. Two little just examples here of the kind of praise that is easy to give without thinking. Okay, what a great description. You're a very good writer. Okay, child feels, yes, I am a very good writer, but then may fall at the next hurdle. Much better, much more positive to give the kind of praise and feedback that actually focuses on why the writing was good and also the kind of effort and persistence that has been made as well. Okay, so moving on rapidly now to the next element in my wheel. R, would you like to guess? It's quite easy, this one. I haven't made it tricky. Any ideas? No, lots of R words. Any ideas? What about rapport? Rapport or relationships. Okay, and at the end of this wheel, we might like to think which are the most important ingredients for us. And rapport, for me, would certainly be an absolute key one. So what is actually rapport? Rapport, a state of trust and mutual responsiveness, an experience of, if you like, of being understood. And there it is, rapport. And I would just like to tell you very briefly about a survey. I was giving a talk on emotional intelligence in the primary classroom, and I saw it was Michael Berman, who unfortunately died last year, but he had done a survey with adult students about what makes a teacher special for you. And in the school that I was working, the state school that I was working at in Madrid, I asked the class teachers, I prepared this survey. So it wasn't about English teachers, it was about teachers in general. And this survey was distributed in Spanish to over 200 children between the ages of 6 and 12. And I'm just going to need to get you my, so I remember what they said. Anyway, I thought it's actually, in terms of rapport, it's really interesting to hear what children say themselves about what they think makes a teacher. And these were the top things that came up. That a teacher needs to be kind, caring, funny, listens to you, makes you work, tells you off if necessary, but doesn't get angry or shout. Isn't that, they've got it, haven't they? That's what we need to do, that's all we need to do. I found it fascinating to see the differences between older children and younger children. Okay, older children were very keen on someone who explains things well, is patient, treats you equally, has no favorites, and doesn't go on and on. Okay. And the younger children wanted someone who wears colourful clothes. It's so sweet, isn't it? And big earrings, a lot of them said. Yeah, okay. Yeah, and looks good. Okay. So, so children's response is very important there. And of course, actually, we go round the world developing rapport with other people. And I love the way Daniel Goleman, in his book on emotional intelligence, talks about the way we have neural Wi-Fi. And we go around finding things in common with people that help us to relate to them. And of course, this is manipulated appallingly, it depends on your thinking, in sales techniques. That car salesmen, they're actually trained. If you say you want a car because you've got your dog, they immediately say, oh, I love dogs, I've got a dog too, and you get on a wavelength. But that is what rapport is all about. But of course, rapport with a group is often quite difficult to establish. It's one thing establishing individual rapport, but getting group rapport is something that we need some techniques to do. And there are many, of course. We'll just have a look at a few now, okay, the kind of techniques that we can do. First of all, the kind of activities which allow for a personalized response and allow for people to discover similarities between them. So, for example, this little activity here called cat or dog, which I'd love to do with you, but I don't think I will because of the kind of format of the room. But this is a little activity where we have contrasting things like cat or dog, and it's just one side of the room or the other. And the children move, walk, no running, health or safety, to the side of the room of the thing that they prefer, okay, and then talk to the others about why and so on. We always have to be adaptable when we don't have the space to do the activity as we want, okay, so we will just do this now. So if you prefer cat, it's hands on heads, and if you prefer dog, it's waving arms in the air, okay? So cat, the one that I say first, hands on head, and dog, waving arms in the air. Then look and see if anyone's got the same as you, and talk about why, okay? So, ready? Cat or dog? Okay. Another one. Milk or juice? The first one is hands on heads, okay, because we can't run. Okay, and find someone, okay. Strawberry ice cream, chocolate ice cream. Okay, here's one for the grown-ups. Wine or beer? Yeah, you like that one better, don't you? Okay, fantastic. And one for the teacher educators, teaching 4-year-olds or teaching 11-year-olds. Look round and see, oh, okay. Okay, you're pretty clear about that one. Okay, fantastic. Other things to do with creating rapport, building on the concept of pacing and leading from NLP, but actually NLP, although it's not evidence-based and there are huge holes in it, it has taught me at least little techniques and strategies that are useful. And pacing and leading is about starting off where the children are and taking them to where you want to go, being a bit like a Pied Piper of Hamelin in the classroom, if you like. So, for example, when you come into class, if you're not there already, and the children are all over the place, they're jumping on their desk, they're messing around, and before you know it, before 30 seconds of class have gone by, you're going, sit down, be quiet, get out your books. You're absolutely exhausted before the lesson starts. Much better to get on the wavelength of the children and lead them somewhere else. And a way that I used to do this is little rhymes, little kind of action rhymes. We'll do one now, just in case you're getting too comfortable. Could you just all stand up? Okay. So you're full of energy. Okay. So I come in, and rather than telling you all off and getting you to sit down, we just start this rhyme. Okay. First, touch your toes. Next, run on the spot. Then stretch your arms, be careful with your neighbour, and bend a lot. After that, look up, stretch your arms up high. Imagine you can touch the sky. Finally, relax, sit down, and then close your eyes and count to 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Good morning, children. Please open your books at page 48. Okay. So we leave them where we want to go. Okay, other things that we can do. Universal questions. Do you want to ask now, or can we have it at the end? Okay. Universal questions. Questions to which the answer is the same for everybody. It's very bonding. It creates group rapport. For example, I want you to shout yes or no to my questions, okay. Are you happy to be at APPI? Yes. Oh, it didn't sound that happy. Okay, yes, okay. Are you glad you're going to have a holiday tomorrow? Yes. Okay, so universal questions. Another technique, so often in the classroom we have, children putting up their hands. And how often is it always the same children putting up their hands? So why don't we get everyone to put up their hands? And we do this by put up your right hand if you know the answer. I know there are conceptual problems here with left and right, which is why you have to demonstrate. You have to demonstrate. Put your right hand up if you know the answer, and put your left hand up if you don't know the answer. Okay, so like this, we can have everyone involved. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a little question now. Right, you know. Left, you don't know. Which is bigger, African elephant or Asian elephant? Okay, so that we can then choose, okay? And someone can say, I don't know, or say the answer. Let's do one more on the same topic. Which is bigger, African lion or Asian lion? I want to see all those hands up, please. Yes or no? You're not sure? Okay, you can do. Sandy knows. Okay. Well, in case you're dying for the answer, it's African in both cases. Okay. Other things, and I'm seriously running out of time here already, to do with ritual responses. One of the things that I particularly do with my kindergarten children, when we've all done something or somebody's performed something and we've done it really well, we have a little ritual where we all clap and we go, fantastic, or amazing, or brilliant. It doesn't matter, okay? And the children just love it, and they clap and they go, fantastic, and we get this lovely intonation pattern. And that is very kind of bonding. And the last kind of thing we can do as well, and this was very aptly demonstrated in the session we saw yesterday with, Shake Your Feather Tail with Anna Piddish. And this is to do with the bonding factor of music. And if we have songs that we use with our children with particular actions, okay, that we all do together. We'll do a little demonstration of this now. I'm not, because this is being recorded, I'm using a song that I am allowed to use, okay, and I don't know if you can see the first verse up there. We're not going to listen to the whole thing, but just to get the idea. Okay, so the children know the actions to this song. Could I just teach them to you? Life is fantastic. Can I just see that? Show me. Okay. Technology is great. Okay. Technology is great. We've got gadgets, photos, camera. Okay. Let's communicate. Okay. So you're ready to do that. So we're just going to do the chorus and sing it all together. Would you stand up? Okay. Okay. Everyone ready? Remember the actions? Because we're not going to do the whole song. We don't have time. Okay.
Life is fantastic, technology is great. We've got gadgets, let's communicate. How about a chat today?
Do you want to do it once more?
Call me on your mobile phone.
Do it once more.
We've got lots to talk about. I don't want to feel alone.
Ready?
Life is fantastic, technology is great. We've got gadgets, let's communicate. Why not send them?
Okay, fantastic. Of course, you'd never done that song, you'd never even heard it, but once it's a familiar part of the repertoire, it's something incredibly bonding. And actually, when you read about it in the literature, you know, the fact is that we're all breathing together and doing something at the same time, and that is very bonding. Okay, so just ending this little section on rapport, this quote from Maya Angelou that I won't read out. You know, she died quite recently, and we were all reminded of this. And actually, that is so true, I think. You know, you think back to your teachers, people who've been important to you. It's actually how they made you feel that really counted. Okay, so moving on with my wheels super rapidly now. E is for, what do you think? Would you like to? There are actually two E's in this wheel. And the first one I'll put you out of your agony. It's for engagement. And engagement, as Mark Burns and Andy Griffiths say in their wonderful book on the subject, that engagement is the fertile soil that enables sustainable learning to take place. Actually, without engagement, we have nothing. And it's illustrated, if you like, by this, you know, old proverb. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And what we need to do with our pre-primary and primary children is to make them thirsty for learning. We can't oblige them to drink. You know, the proverb is true. But what we need to do is create those conditions that will allow for that sustainable learning to take place. And engagement, of course, is a huge topic, but just very briefly concerns a number of things. First of all, arousing that initial curiosity. And of course, there are millions of techniques that we use to do that. You know, we ask questions, riddles, guessing, hiding things, you know, stimulating with interesting questions or objects in the classroom. Curiosity. Relevance. And I don't just mean relevance to the ministry syllabus that we have to teach. What I mean is relevance to the child. The what's in it for me factor. You know, when you're preparing your lessons, you always need to ask yourself that. What's in this for the children? Okay, I want them to learn present simple, third person S, but what's in it for them? Hugely important. Goals. Are they clear? Are they worthwhile? Are they attainable? Do the children have the skills and competencies necessary to reach them? Because if they don't, there won't be engagement. Next point. Sorry, next 2 points. Never mind, I won't go back. The challenge, the level of challenge. We know that if things are too easy for our children, they get bored and they're likely to get disruptive. We also know that if things are too difficult, they get anxious and they're also likely to get disruptive. So we need to find ways of finding an appropriate level of challenge for the different individuals in our class. We also, of course, need to ensure the competencies to do things. And I already mentioned that in terms of goal. The next thing, choice. You know something, we always are more interested and more committed to doing things when we have chosen what it is we're going to do. And in a classroom situation, we can give choice in very little ways. It may be what colour you colour the picture, or how you present a project. Of course, also at the deep end, you know, those of you who might be familiar with dogme and so on, there might be pedagogic choices about what we're actually doing in the classroom. But there are always choices that we can give. It may be to do with children we work with. We can't always give that choice. But choice is a huge factor in engagement. Enjoyment. There tends to be more engagement when there is humour and when there is a sense of fun. But not necessarily so, and not necessarily all the time. Engagement also comes from serious challenge, and even children as young as 4 are prepared to take that on when they are interested and see the relevance of what we're doing. And of course, engagement, when we have engagement, it leads to flow, which is the Csikszentmihalyi concept originally developed in the context of American athletes and sports achievement. But flow is to do with that feeling of harnessing the emotions for the task in hand. That feeling of, I can do this, I want to do this, I'm going to do it, and I'll feel good when I've done it. It's to do with internal motivation rather than carrot and stick kind of motivation. Okay, so moving on in my wheel, S. Any guesses? Just have a quick water break while you think. There's a session on this topic after the break by Diana. So I will go very fast. S is for support or scaffolding. Scaffolding wouldn't fit into the slot, so I called it support. Okay, scaffolding then. Scaffolding, the metaphorical concept developed by Brunner in order to explain how we can help guide children through Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. I'm not going to go into this in detail. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with this. But the idea behind scaffolding is the way that in scaffolding, the metaphor of the building, of course, you put scaffolding up and you can take it down. It is to do with handing over independence to the child. It's to do with pulling back, if you like, and in Brunner's terms, initially, restricting the freedom of what the child has to do in order to then be able to hand over. Now, the original principle of scaffolding was developed in relation to young children and young children's learning of their first language. But writers like Pauline Gibbons and Van Leer have also seen the relevance of the concept of scaffolding to foreign language teaching and learning as well. And Van Leer talks about 3 layers of scaffolding. Global, okay, to do with the overall outcomes. Activity level of scaffolding, to do with the way we sequence what we do in the classroom. And the 3rd level, the local interactional level. The local interactional level that we might just briefly consider with, you know, a typical story. I'm sorry, I know at the back you can't see this. A typical story that we might use, you know, with our preschool children. And a concept that I think is that I'm going to mention because I find it very helpful myself in my own teaching to have it my own metacognitive awareness of it is the concept of distancing strategies which move from low, medium, and high, and actually present a different level of challenge to the child in the kind of questions that you ask. So, for example, in a story like this, you know, where's my mummy, where the poor little duckling can't find his mummy. So this page, for example, it goes through saying, hello, mummy, okay? So an example of low-level distancing might be simply to ask the children, you know, what colour's the duck? Okay, yellow, just what's in the pictures. Medium level would be looking at how the pictures relate to each other. So is the dog duck's mummy? Very good. You are stunningly brilliant. Okay, lovely. And the third level, which is arguable whether you would ask this question in English or the children's own language, what will the little duck do now to find mummy? So do you get the idea? And actually, when you have that concept in your head and you are working with a group of 25 children, you can adjust the kind of questions that you ask appropriately. It's a very, very helpful way to scaffold. And I think one of the things that Van Leer says, and I actually feel very strongly about this, that actually this local interactional scaffolding, the kind of thing that we do all the time in the class, we ask questions developing lower order skills, higher order thinking skills, we prompt, we use body language, we recast, we correct, we go back. All these things that we are doing on the spot in their classes are perhaps, as Van Leer suggests, the most important things in our teaching. I'm not going to read that out to you now, but you can see that there. Okay, moving on super rapidly and talking about impact. I is for impact. I'm not even giving you a chance to guess because of the time. Okay, I is for impact and relates to the work, again, of John Hattie, Visible Learning for Teachers. John Hattie talks about, he expresses it in biblical terms, know thy impact, that it's the strongest message of Hattie to teachers, that we at all times have a responsibility and a duty to think about, to reflect on and analyse the impact that we are having on our learners. And of course, and ourselves, the first thing is through feedback. Okay, and the important thing about feedback is not just to listen to it and to receive it, but to act on it. And not just to do feedback, for example, when there's a periodic assessment or test, but feedback on a daily basis. You know, what happened? Why did it go well? Why didn't it? How can I learn from this? What can I do about it? Remembering that in a class of 25 or 30 children, you are the only person whose actions you can change. So impact, really important. L, to do with language of learning. And this is to do with developing our children's metacognitive skills and developing, actually teaching them the language of learning. Because if we don't, they don't have the tools to talk about their own learning. So some examples of words here. Okay, I'm not talking necessarily for 4-year-olds here, but sometimes we resist, I think, giving children the language to talk about their own learning. When I hear a little 6-year-old telling me that for their homework, they say, I'm going to do some research on the Vikings, it's very empowering. It's very, it's enabling them. It's giving them the foundations to be responsible, autonomous learners and talk about it themselves. My last E, and I realise I've got about 2 minutes to go, but this E is to do with expectations. Expectations. We need, and it doesn't matter whether we're teaching 3-year-olds or business students in the Ishkata. It doesn't matter. That's what I heard someone saying. Anyway, we need to communicate high expectations. It is a truism, perhaps, but nevertheless something we need to remember, that our students almost always, even if they're 3 years old, know more than we give them credit for. They're usually capable of more than we ask them to do, and are often very sensitive and mature. As teachers, we have to refuse, and this is part of our mindset that I mentioned at the beginning, failure is not an option. And, if we buy into the idea that a child is a failure, we're actually contributing to that cycle. I don't really have time to talk about this in detail, but I was just going to mention I had the most extraordinary experience once when I went to a conference. It was in the Czech Republic, the Hupé conference, and they asked presenters if they would actually teach children a lesson while teachers watched. It was the most terrifying thing I've ever done in my life. I had 30 children and about 90 teachers watching me. And I used this story, and I started off, and I don't think I've ever been so terrified in my life, because of course I was far more aware of the teachers than the children. But as the lesson went on, using this story, which won the UNESCO Literature Prize for Children because it's about peace and bullying, and this was in the 1990s, and the Balkans War had just ended. And these children, a group of 30 children, I'd never met them before. I couldn't speak a word of their language. And as we went through the story, they were trying to tell me in the English they had about the experience of war that they had that I knew nothing about. And it was the most extraordinary thing, and you could have heard a pin drop in that room. I forgot all about the teachers. And for me, it brought it home how actually, we make assumptions about what children, they were coming up with things about war and conflict that were extraordinary. So expectations, keep them high. If you treat your 5-year-olds like first-year university students, the fact is they respond to it. They respond as grown-up. So expectations, hugely important. The last thing on my wheel is C. C for, creativity, it could be. Actually, do you know what it's for? It's for collaboration. And collaboration at 2 levels. First of all, of course, to do with teachers, with each other, going back to how we learn in the first place. Because sometimes as a teacher in your classroom, you are so isolated. You close your door, you get on with it, okay? But it's actually through collaboration, through that interdependency, that we share all the things that are so difficult about teaching and learn from each other. And of course, in our classrooms, what we need to do is foster a community of learning where we all feel we belong, where diversity is valued, where children don't feel fear about speaking up, never mind if they know the present perfect tense, well, even primary, we're not expecting that. But where there is communication and collaboration is fostered. And I think it's Van Leer who says that there is a synergy in interdependency, that bonding creates the kind of foundations for learning. Okay, being a primary teacher myself, I have, of course, made my wheel, okay, with all the elements. And I would recommend that you do the same. Make your own wheel. It doesn't need to be like mine. Or it may have some of the elements, or you may change them. And if you're working some of you are teacher educators, I know, that this is quite a fun activity to do with your teacher trainees. Get them to make their own reflective wheel, and then, you can play with it and talk about the ingredients. Okay, so that brings me to the end of my session. I hope it's given you food for thought. Thank you very much.